Hello, I'm going to show you how to sew fabric lining in a tote bag here. Now this is my own pattern that I have wrote, but you can see there's the 4 squares and then the handle up at the top. There's nothing sewn in it currently because that's what we're going to be working on. I'm just going to show you how I do it essentially, and then I'm going to show you how I do it with my hat as well. This is also a pattern that I wrote, but I like putting fabric linings on the inside as well, just to add a little layer of, comfortableness in between the crocheted. But the first thing you're going to need is your bag or your hat, whichever one you are using, if you're doing both, if you're doing just one, if you're just doing this as a reference, if you're just watching this just to watch this. But what you're going to need is at least 1 yard of fabric, and I have this one right here. It's just a tan color to match the mono brown theme that I have going on. In my experience, 1 yard of this will do 1 tote bag and 2 different hats. As you can see here, I have another hat that already has lining in it. This one's just slightly different. But you're going to need your fabric. I have this little pack of a different color variety of sewing string, and then this is my makeshift little sewing kit. But inside it, we just need out the sewing needles. You can do little sewing needles, you can do embroidery needles, whichever you feel comfortable with using, and then just scissors. That's all you need. So make sure you grab everything, and then we will get started. Now that I have my sewing string here, I'm just going to set it to the side. I flipped my tote bag inside out. As you can see, this is the right side of the way, just because you want the fabric to lay inside correctly. And as you can see here, my bag has some weird splotchiness to it. That's because I hot glue down all of my edges, which is why I add fabric lining inside of all of them, just for safety and security. But you're going to want to just cut the little tag off as I do. Open it up. The reason I'm showing you this is so you can see how to line it properly. You get a lot of fabric out of this, so you have to take the edges, and where you're preferably going to want to be is where these 2 edges meet still, so that way one side of the bag is already sewed. So you're going to flip that out, and once again, this side is still connected in the fold over, so that's what we're looking for, that's what we want. You're going to line it up with your bag, so you can't really see the bag anymore. I'll flip this over so you guys can. You're going to want to overline it just a little bit, so you have what we call negative ease here, like that's too much. You're going to want to go probably that much, so this much little extra on the sides, on the bottom, and on the top, just so you have a little bit of a negative ease there. And essentially what you're doing is you're keeping a little bit on the sides in order to ensure that you can keep the seam correct. Alright, you can see here that this is the edge that I cut from the fabric itself. Just set that aside. And here you can see your tote bag, which has the little bit of the negative ease around each side, minus the handles. We're not going to put any on that, so that's not what's important. Now is when you get to the sewing aspect. So if you don't know how to knead your thread, I will show you how to do that as well. You're just going to look for the small string that you have open and pull it, and this one was already opened for me, so I will grab one to show you how to open it, just in case you're using a newer thread. I believe I've used red before, so I'll show you how to do that. As you can see, there is no thread poking out of this one. Usually there will be very small, I don't know if you can catch that, things where it'll catch onto your string when you are done, but it doesn't look like this one has one open. So what I like to do is I just like to take my scissors and kind of brush against it, try to see if I can find where the open edge is. Because you can sometimes see it if you're looking hard enough, but sometimes you can't see it. This one is a more difficult one for sure, because I'm not seeing it pop open. I think it is stuck under here. So if I were just to go under there a little bit, because I can see a little bit of it stuck. There we go, it is on here. Sometimes the one method does work, sometimes it doesn't. But as you can see, my string is now open. But I feel like that was a little pointless. I did my best to try, right? And sometimes that's all you can do. But I'm just going to go back to where I was. You're just going to take an amount of sewing string. I usually like to let it unwind quite a few times because you're going to want it to go as most of the way as it can. Even though it is quite annoying at first when you're using it, it'll whittle down as you go. Cut the excess or where you want to end your yarn string. I'm going to move that to the side. And probably the worst part is trying to thread the needle. Now, if you are used to using a small threader to help you, you can. I'm sure it's much easier than what I try to do. But I sort of just try to eye level it, where I just slide it through there. I've been sewing for a few years now, so I can do that more or less easily. But if you need a small threader to help you, there are usually some available in like small sewing kits that you can purchase from Walmart, for example. So if you don't have all of the sewing tools, you can easily just buy one from there. You can also just buy one in general, I believe, from there. But you're going to double thread it. So you are going to pull the string through, which I'm not sure how well you can see this on camera since it's so small. But I just like to tie it around my finger and then pull it through a loop. And it is sewing string, so it takes quite a few loops in order to make a knot big enough for your fabric to actually go through. So that way you can start your project. You can see it's looping out. There's like a small little loop there now. But I just wrap it around my fingers quite a few times, just like this, to try to get a big enough knot that we can work with. And I'm not sure how many times I have to loop it. It is a little different depending how you loop it each time. But I think this might be good enough. You can't really see it. But you're going to have that on the edge of your yarn. This is sewing string, good ma'am. That's not correct. I'm just going to remove the tote bag for now because I don't need it for this part. And all I'm left with is my fabric. I'm going to go to the one edge where the seam seems to connect. And I'm going to check if this is the inside or the outside of the fabric. There's no difference here to the inside and the outside. But I will grab a different fabric to show you what I'm referring to. I have this little like Yoshi and Mario fabric just to show you what I mean on the correct way to hold that as well. I'm a little nervous cutting this, that I don't cut the fabric on accident because I haven't used this one yet. But as you can see, here is the edge of this small cut of fabric. It usually happens with pattern fabrics, but as you can see, I'm opening it up. It is just blank on one side. It's just like it's just like white. It doesn't have the vibrancy that this side does, which means that this is the inside of the fabric. So if you were to be working with a pattern fabric right now, which you very well could be if you're not doing the same thing as me, then you would want to keep yours out like this. So fold it over to match your bag length, and you would want to sew these sides together. And then as you would sew, so let's say you were to sew this side, and this is now your block that you're working with. You would flip it inside out, and then you would have this really pretty block here. But I don't have a wrong or right way to my fabric today, so it doesn't really matter which way I sew it. But I'm going to start on the edge that is already pre-done for me because of how I cut the fabric originally. If you don't have this, it's no worries. You just have to sew over a third side, unfortunately. I'm sorry. But you're just going to go into the fabric as a test to see if your knot's big enough. So just poke your sewing needle through and pull through. Sometimes it can get a little caught up and you might have to just help it ease through a little bit. But we'll see if this knot's big enough. And it was not. So I have to re-knot this a little bit more and I'll be back when it works. Alright, I have knotted my string more. If I can pick up the sewing needle, there we go. As you can see, when I give it some gentle tugs now, it won't come out of the fabric, and that is exactly what we're looking for to keep sewing. So what I like to do is I like to fold over each edge a bit, and if I'm sewing this way, I'm going to want it this way. just so it creates that nice ridge, if you can see it, when you flip it inside out. So just fold it over just a little bit in order to achieve the matte look. And you're just going to take your sewing string and poke through each side, pulling the excess through, and then doing the same thing again, going through. Make sure your string comes over, just so it's not getting caught on the edge and pulling. And then you pull through, and then you go through it again. Pull your string over so it doesn't hit the edge, and pull through. Mine's having a little issues, so I just gotta pull it back a little bit, and then pull it back through. It's really not liking me today. And go through, and you're just going to want to repeat this until you get up to the top or until your string runs out, and I will show you how to fix it. Alright, I am at the end of my string here. As you can see, there is not much left to it, but lined up next to my bag. Here's the end of my seam, here's the top of my bag. It's close enough that I can get away with it, so I won't have to restring on this side, but I will have to restring on the other side anyways. As you can see here, I got too big of a knot and I couldn't pull through the rest of this string. And that's okay. I mean, it happens sometimes. It's not what we're here for, but it's life. I can't do anything about it, so I just kept going and I made it to the end. But what you're going to want to do in order to cast off, to speak, is you're going to want to go through again as you normally would for a stitch. And you see how you have a little loop there? You're going to take your needle through the loop before it can fully close and have your needle through it like that. You're going to want to do that a second time, rework through the same loop, and then pull through, pull tight, and then you're going to want to just cut the string. And I have a little bit left on here, we'll deal with that in a second. But it creates a very small little knot there that makes it so it can't be pulled apart. And just to see the inside of the bag, just real quick to show you, it'll look like that on the inside. So it does have like the little bit of the homemade touch to it. It's not as good as a sewing machine would be, but we're not here with the sewing machine, we're here with our hands. But that is one side fully sewn up. You will now attach on the same way and sew up the same way on this side of the bag, and then we'll get back with each other. Alright, my second side is sewed. So that is both of them because this one came pre-done for me from how I cut it. The only side that should be open still is the top where I will be putting it into the bag. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to flip this inside out. I just grab both edges and then pull through. You might even want to go back inside and sort of push the edges a little bit just to create the corners. And then you can see what your bag looks like from the inside. You can see the little seam there, and you can see the little seam there. It just covers in, so you can't really see it from the front angle. And you're going to want to open up your, my voice, sorry about that. You're going to want to open up your bag and just slip this part in there. You're going to want to reach corner to corner. I like putting the corner in and then holding it and going to the other corner. So that is my corner to corner side. And then flip this in, pull it up, make sure, oh, hit you, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to do that. I'm a little aggressive today, apparently. You're going to want to make sure that it is all covered in fabric, which mine is now. As you can see, here's all of my negative fabric that I will need to sew around now, which is okay. But my edges have to meet with these. So what you're going to need to do next is get another string on here, so I will do that. So one thing I want to do before I attach my string, which I have right here, is I'm just going to cut off a bit of the excess now, just so it gets less in my way while sewing the trim, and I feel like you'll be able to see more of what I'm doing. And I'm not the best at cutting fabric, so ignore all the really jagged edges. That's not really why we're here. We're here to try, not to be perfect, right? You can't really be perfect when you're hand sewing. Something's always going to end up a little bit different. But you're not going to see this fabric within the bag anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much. I'm just trying to cut it off so you can see what I'm doing and I can see what I'm doing as well. Move the fabric to the side, and now we just have a little bit less to work with. I'm going to make sure my handles are both correct. They are. And you're just going to take the fabric on one side, because I'm going to start on one side obviously. I'm just going to do the same technique where I fold over half of it like we did on the sides, and I'm going to attach my string, give me my needle, onto the very rough edge that we had already sewn previously. Sew it through here so it will stay put. Is my string good? The string is good. And I'm just going to put it up to the side of the bag like so. And here's where it can get a little tricky. I go through each of the V stitches. So if you're crocheting, you know what that means. If you don't crochet and you're here for like knitting, for example, or you're just trying to sew one itself, that is this small little stitch right here. Oh, see, that's what happens when you catch an edge. It is this small little stitch here where you can see there's one and then two. That is called your V stitch. I just go through that and then through the fabric each turn, just so I can like be sure that the fabric is sticking to the bag, that it's not going to come off of the bag for any reasoning, and that it will create a nice fine stripe all the way up to the front of the bag, so you won't see any of those insides because I glue them, so I don't want you to feel those when you're reaching in your bag. But also a fabric lining can be pretty handy if you're trying to empty it, or if you just want it to look a little nicer inside. You could even go a step further and sew a pocket within the inside, which I've never done before, but maybe it would be a fun little idea to try that. So here I am at the handle now, which might be the hardest part about it, just because you have to flip it around now. I'm just going to go through this part like so, flip it back, make sure I caught my fabric, which I did, go through, put it through the fabric, flip the handle, okay, I'm where I want to be, and then I sew like this, and I will go around until I get to the corner, and then I will meet back up with you then. So I'm at my corner, and it's a little rough to say, so I'm just going to like flip and fold some of my fabric just to make it fit a little bit better in this corner here, although this will definitely not be some of my best work. There was a little too much of the negative ease. I can't really fix that anymore. It's just how it's gotta be. But now that I'm here at the corner, I'm just going to move the fabric over. I'm going to try to fold it over as many times as necessary, just to keep the cleanish look while also trying to hide any of the fabric folds within this corner, because you're less likely to see the corner as much as you are to see the front or the back of the bag, depending on how the person will be holding it, which is why I like to try to ruffle up some of the fabric here and just hide it a little bit, and then just continue as normal as if it never happened. We're just going to ignore that I had to fold over a teeny bit. It happens. You can't get the perfect fabric lining without the perfect measurements, but I don't really measure that well. But you can see it's still got a little bit of fabric fold to it, but that's okay. As you can see on this side, I don't know how well you'll be able to see it because I color matched this pretty well with the fabric in the bag. There will be a very tiny line on your fabric half, and then on your yarn half, you'll see again a super tiny little line. But if you can color match it pretty well, you won't even notice it unless you are staring at your bag very hard. I'm almost at the end of my yarn here. Why do I keep saying yarn? I think too much of crochet. I'm almost at the end of my sewing string, so I'm probably going to want to end it here. So how I like to end it when I'm on a fabric like this and I'm trying to, trying to seam up the edges like this, I will go through this stitch. I will go through the top of the one loop there like that. I'll only go through one, and then I will flip the fabric out go through just the inside of the fabric, and then I will catch the loop and make the little knot, only so this way I can now fold it underneath and then sew back over it. So let me get some more sewing string. Okay, now that I have some string, I have to test to see if it is good enough. So we will do that. I like to go through, you see how I ended on the inside? I will start on the inside as well to hide the knot within. Let's see. Tug, tug, tug. We are good. I'm also on the handle again, which is not ideally the best place to need to change out yarn. But because I am on this side, I'm just going to move to a different section so I don't pull through the same spot on accident. I caught a little bit on the bag there. And continue around as normal, how I showed you, until we get to the end. And then we will come back together to see the end result. Alright, now that I am at the edge and there's nothing that I can really do to hide the end seam, I'm just going to create the small knot. And then what I try to do is I just go through the hole, I pull through a different side, and I just snip it. And then that would be the end of your tote bag. Your fabric lining would be inside. You could still pull it out to do like a little barfing situation if you'd like. You could put it back in, you know. But that is what the end result of the tote bag looks like. And now we will go on to the hat. Alright, now that we have our hat, I'm just going to flip it inside out. I also have a couple strings here to burn in. Don't worry about those. But we have our hat inside out. I'm just going to place it over there for a second. You are going to need your fabric again. I'm using the same color. Maybe you're using a different color. Maybe you aren't making a bag as well and you're just here for the hat. Who knows? But we'll see. So I'm going to unfold mine completely this time. You only need one layer for the hat. This was from the bag from where I cut it, so ignore that. What I like to do is I kind of like to eyeball it like this and see like how much I will need immediately. And I think I'm going to cut it this way to like get rid of this excess. I should probably just cut this off to make even, because I feel like it's probably easier than just leaving it there. And we'll worry about something to use with that later. But I can see that I'm probably going to need this much. So what I want to do now is see what it would be like on the hat itself. So I flip it this way, and then I flip over to see how much would be, and it's like roughly the same area. So I'm just going to very loosely cut in a curved like circle around the trim of the hat. It's definitely too much, but once again, you do want that like negative room, but not overly negative room, just so you don't have way too much fabric. But considering how much I'm cutting, I'll show you how to fix that just in case you do have too much. But this is just how I've inserted fabric into my hats. Is it the best method? No, probably not, but that's what we're trying. So the first thing I'm going to need is more string, so be right back. So now that I have my string, I'm just going to set that to the side because we need the fabric on the top. And once again, if you're using a pattern fabric like this Mario one, you will want to look at the inside and the outside of the fabric. But we are here, I have a single colored one, and I'm just going to try to like fold the edges over to see if this is big enough, because it is a rounded surface, which I don't think my fabric is even the correct size. As you can see, when I put it flat over, there is not enough fabric there. So I have to recut mine, which is fine. I will move that off to the side. Now I know that I need more. I'm going to try to cut on the hat itself rather than how I did it initially. But, you know, sometimes you just gotta learn. I'm still learning myself, so. Alright, so I'm going to look around the hat, see if there's fabric covered in every area. If not, I'm going to tug it a little bit more. I don't know how I'm going to cut this now. I suppose I will move this to the side, and I will just somehow manage to cut little by little away from the hat. So maybe if you're doing this weird method like I am, maybe it won't cover 2 hats like I thought, because this is wasting a lot of fabric. But if you're like me and you're just going to hoard it in a drawer for 3 years and then figure out a use for it later, then it doesn't really matter if you're cutting it like this. Or if you make small things, like if you know how to make like smaller pockets, or if you know how to make little animals or anything like that, then I suppose you cutting off this bit of fabric won't make a difference because you'll find something to use it for. I probably won't for a while, but that's okay. I'm just going to mock shift my way around this hat and ramble a little bit more while I do, in order to try to get the perfect amount of fabric, since I cut it wrong using the other method, which you learn, you know, you live and you learn, and I learned that that method wasn't quite doing it for me. And then I'm going to cut around this side, which I will do. Alright, now that I have way too much fabric and each circle around has the fabric covered over where the lining will end, we can start. But I will say that when I'm adding my fabric lining, I'm not going over the trim here. My lining will stop at this cream colored part here, so it'll be like this, and then the trim won't be covered, only because I can't imagine, like, I already messed up sewing this curvature in general. Imagine trying to sew a multiple little curvatures in general. And I will say I've only sewn a hat lining once before, so this is just my makeshift way of how I'm doing it. If this isn't your thing, then you know, I tried with you. I tried. I'm just going to pop my string in here to attach it. That fits fantastic. Am I going to, I think I'm going to try and just sew the fabric onto the hat, or should I try to wing it? I don't know. I'm thinking, let me think. Alright, I'm going to sew it straight onto the hat rather than trying to make a seam, so I'm just going to try to seam the same way I did with the edging of the tote bag with the hat here, which might come back and bite me in the butt later. We'll find out when we get around the hat. But I'm just going to go like this as long as I can before I have to get to a fold to crease it over, just flipping back and forth, looking at where I'm going with my needle, just to try and meet the edges all the way around. It's going to create like ruffles inside of the hat. I don't think there's a way around that since this is a circular object and you're pulling and pushing fabric. So if that's something that you wanted here, I guess just click off this video now, because it's not going to help you in any regards. If you're here just to quick pop a liner in there because you wanted to fasten down your edges like I do, or if you are in a rush and you don't really care what the inside of the hat looks like, maybe you're making it for someone you don't really care for, maybe you're making it for yourself and you don't really care about the appearance inside of the hat. But either way, I am here to still try to show you how to do it regardless of the ruffles. And until I come up with a ruffling problem, I am just going to go around the crease of the hat, stopping it at the trim like so. Alright, I sewed around a bit and now I am at a trim error where I have this flap here that I have to sew around. As you can see, the rest of the hat still has fabric covering. It's just this flap here, which is going to screw me over. So I'm going to make sure that it is all covered, and then I'm going to lay my hat down. I think how I'm going to approach this seam, because I think I had this problem the first time as well, is I'm going to try to sew it down like this. Flip a little bit of the edge to keep the symmetrical feeling, and then flip that over under. Perfect. And then I would need my string. I'm not sure where it was. Then I'm going to sew over it, and I'll probably come back to this later just to sew it or even glue it down potentially. But I'm going to go over this a couple times since this is where the two fabrics meat, I got one of my hairs in it as well. Just to ensure that this point here where these two meet are not, it's not coming undone, it's not going anywhere. It's not going to flare up in the hat and look awful in comparison. I've gone over it 3 times, so that should be enough, should be 3rd time's a charm. And I'm going to just go past it for now. We will come back to that later. I'm just going to continue around the hat as normal, flipping the edges as I go a little bit just to create the same look that the top of the bag had. And I will just keep working, and I will meet you back here if I have another problem or if I'm done. Alright, I'm back. I had another crease fold problem. As you can see, I have now one here and one here, and I have a really bad one on this last side of the hat. As you can see, I have like a square and a half left to sew for the actual hat itself. The rest of it's looking alright. But it is here that is the problem, because if I tried to sew up this half, it would create a 3rd fold, which isn't that bad. But then I would have a 4th fold on this side, trying to fold over into that, which would create a pretty bad access here. So I'm just going to show you in case you're following along and you also have this really bad fold here. I am just going to try to trim away as much excess as I possibly can right now to avoid the huge bunchiness of me rolling over these 2 fabrics. I don't know how much is too much. I don't know how much is too little. I think this is cutting it a little bit close, so I'm going to try to go like this and leave a bit more excess. And I'm just going to take this edge as my way out, and we'll see how much this can save. As you can see, this is a lot of excess fabric to be dealing with. There's a lot less on the hat now. I might even take a little bit of this off, just because it seems to be a little too much there as well. This is not the best tutorial. I apologize for that, but I am doing my best. You are doing your best. We are here. We are accomplishing our fabric dreams. But now I can sort of fold this under a lot longer without needing another crease. And then I can fold this over a lot longer, which would result in only 1 crease, rather than me having the 2 and then the huge bunched up excess. So I will have to go in and fix the eventual dipples, but I'll be back until then. Alright, I am back. I am nearing the end. I think I only have 2 more stitches to do, and then I am done with the interior of the hat lining. I'm probably going to go over and hot glue the little riffles down, so you can stick tuned for that in just a second. I'm going to do a similar thing like I did with the tote bag, where I'm going to try to catch under as much of the fabric as I can, which isn't that much in this instance since we sewed it down. Do a little knot, and then try to get it through a different way, and then just cut it off. And that will be the end of the sewing portion of this. So if that's all you were here for, then you're done, because it is technically done. There's just a few riffles. This one's a pretty bad one that I want to just glue down. But in terms of you being here just to sew anything into the hat, you don't care about all the extra riffles, like I said before. It doesn't look bad inside. I'm sure it fits and wears just the same as a usual hat would. In fact, I don't think the fabric doesn't really affect that much of you wearing it, just a little bit more comfortable. It's got a little more cushion to it. So if you want to stick around and see me hot glue the edges, then I will do that in one moment. Alright, so that marks the end of this small little snippet tutorial. You have your hat with the fabric inside glued down a little bit just to help it sit better. It still looks great. If anything, it has an extra layer of protection. Your bag as well has that interior now that you can pull in and out at ease if you would like to do that. So all in all, I think these worked out as a great success. So just as a little end disclaimer here, again, I mentioned at the beginning that this is my own pattern that I wrote, and which is being released on my Ribbler account and my Etsy account, which I will link in the description of this video as soon as those links are up and available for you all to use. If you would like to use this pattern more or less, then go for it. Go ahead and use it. All of my patterns will be cheaper on Ribbler. And if you don't know me, it's a very late intro, but I'm Jasmine and I run the Crochettery here on YouTube. I'm doing my best to try to do some little tutorials. I think it'll be good to have like a beginner's tutorial guide to crochet, like how to make all of the stitches, like the double crochet and the single stitches, how to turn them, how to make squares, join squares. I feel like that would be a fun video as well to do. So if you're more of a beginner and you don't really know what to do, then I will have something available for you as well to look out for. But as for the end of this video, I am done. The tutorial is over. My little disclaimer and shout out is finished. So I will see you guys next Friday.